Okay, I got a question here. I literally just read it and I don't have anything prepared. I never really have anything prepared. Um, but this is one that I really want to answer because it reminds me of when. Well, let me just read it first. I don't feel prepared to turn 18. I feel like the past year or so has literally slowed my mental capacity, and it's so hard to slow down and remember it. I've had a fairly rough upbringing, followed by a confusing period of what I now presume to call adolescence, as I like to name the stage of my life maturity. I've done a fair share of psychedelics the past year, leading to some terrifying experiences, which led me to believe they might have possibly triggered some latent mental illnesses, if not brought me to the verge of them or exposed them to the light. I don't want to get into them partially because I feel like hyper obsessing them is one of the things that stresses me out and I want to stop it. I do it all the time. I just don't feel prepared to turn 18. Okay. When I was 18, I had this type of issue too. It's really tough because you're facing a lot of things at the same time. You didn't really have a childhood, from what it sounds like. The way you describe it is that you didn't really have a chance to be carefree and be a child. Did you have to grow up quickly? If you had to grow up quickly and now you're turning 18, this is a huge thing to undertake, because not only did you have to, I'm presuming, to be a very mature and a very grown up young person, but now you are truly going to be an adult and you don't know how to be an adult, how to the way that you perceive adults to be. And I would also assume that you haven't had a lot of role models. I assume that you've had a lot of questions and nobody to answer them. And if that is the case, no wonder you don't feel prepared. There's some comment down here like no one's prepared to grow up. Sure, but I feel like some people cross the bridge easier than others. Some people are better prepared for it, and when you're not prepared for it, you just flounder. So what I hope for you to do, and this is what I wish somebody told me when I was turning 18, is like, yeah, maybe you didn't have the right kind of guidance when you were a teenager. Maybe you were on the right type of trajectory and nobody was there to show you what to do. But now you can't waste your 20s. And I don't say this to really strike fear into you. Um, no, you should be afraid. You shouldn't be afraid of who you are right now, what you're about to overcome. That you should not be afraid of. What you should be afraid of is doing nothing. Because what a lot of people do in your situation, and believe it or not, a lot of people do not talk about this, is they feel this existential dread. They recognize the problems and they don't work on it. They just let themselves flounder. They end up in some sort of job, and next thing they know, they wake up, they're 26, and they're like, "Whoa, what do I do?" I've known so many people that just start to begin their lives in their late 20s. Um, I think you can get it done sooner than that, much sooner. I see here that you mentioned you did psychedelics, and I don't have a ton of experience with that. I did LSD many years ago, and I like microdosed it, and I credit that as to being one of the defining moments of my life. Um, I really turned my life around after LSD, but I did it in a controlled environment with a really good friend. I sat down with a notebook and I just worked out my problems. And the ones I couldn't work out, I identified. And after that, I went and I really looked hard to find a good therapist. And I found the first good therapist I had ever had in my life. And I made so many more strides that way. So it was a really important time for me. I'm not saying that, I'm not saying this to like push you towards psychedelics. I just question your psychedelic use if it was done in the right environment, if it was done in the right mindset. Like when I went into it, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to use this as a tool to figure myself out. I know people use psychedelics to party. I know people use psychedelics while they're feeling paranoid. Those aren't good times to use psychedelics, I feel like. Um, I don't want to say that, again, I'm not a neurologist, and I don't have a background knowledge in psychedelics on the effects of it on the human brain as far as bringing out mental illnesses. But what I've read, I feel like the evidence on that is pretty weak. Um, I don't know. I'm not convinced that you doing psychedelics created mental illness. Now there could be something there. What I think it more likely is you have a lot of issues you haven't resolved. You know, you grew up rough. You don't know where you are. You don't know what you're going to be doing with yourself. I wonder. I mean, you haven't said it, but do you have much of an identity? And what I mean by that is, like, how do you define yourself? Can you define yourself? If you can't, like, psychedelics aren't bringing up mental illnesses. They're showcasing you the issues in which you're currently struggling. And that should show you that you need to start in on this. One thing, start on one thing. And what should that be? Probably your childhood. Figure out your childhood first. I feel like that is usually the biggest roadblock for people. And it has the spider effect, the spider web effect. It affects so many things in people's lives when they have an unresolved childhood. Um, I I would suggest to you that you find a therapist, really take the time to find a therapist, find a good fit, and start from day one. Start with your childhood issues and work through it. Get yourself together on that aspect. Once you get yourself together, your purpose is more able to show itself to you. You can't find your purpose when you don't even know who you are. When you're swimming in this ocean of abuse. And I was watching this podcast with the lead singer of Cro-Mags, John Joseph, and he said something to the effect of, because he was a victim of horrid um, physical, emotional, and sexual abuse as a child. And he said, it's not what happens to the protagonist in a story that defines them. It's what the protagonist does in response. How do you live your life going forward? Yeah, you weren't dealt a good hand, but this doesn't have to define you. Not unless you let it. And I know you're afraid of hyper obsessing over your issues because they stress you out, and yeah, this is stressful to think about. But if you don't face this head on, this will be 10 times worse a few years from now. You have to start now. And if you need more specific advice on that, if you need advice finding a therapist, a good fit therapist, if you just kind of you don't really know where to start, leave a comment, private message me. I don't like seeing people have this coming of age and not know what to do, not even know who they are. I hope this pushes you in the right direction, and I really, really hope, I really truly hope that you can make some progress with this, that you decide that you choose to make progress on this, because you can do it. I 100% believe that, and I don't even know who you are. I'm serious. Be good to yourself.